The Great Plague of London is one of the most infamous outbreaks of bubonic plague, otherwise known as the Black Death, to ever hit England. It's also the reason why I can't get into London right now, because apparently it was a real place. It all started in the year 1665, when an outbreak of bubonic plague began in the English countryside and eventually spread to the capital city, killing more than 100,000 people, or about a third of the population. So here are 10 things you need to know about the Great Plague of London in under 10 minutes. Starting off in the 1660s, Europe was no stranger to the bubonic plague. In fact, there had been at least 3 major outbreaks on the continent by this point, and it was commonly believed that the disease could be spread through bad air, which led people to wear masks with aromatic substances like lavender and mint to protect themselves from the illness. The plague first made landfall in England in June of 1665, when an outbreak occurred in the countryside of Hampshire. There were only a couple dozen cases, and they were all centered around a man named John Hoffman, who had recently come back from a trip to Holland where he picked up fleas that would eventually lead to his death, and the deaths of over 100,000 other people. When the plague reached London, authorities tried to do everything they could to stop it from spreading. One of their main methods of prevention was closing down anything that might attract a lot of people gathering together, such as schools, theaters, and even public houses. Funerals were also banned, which sounds strange, since funerals aren't usually known for attracting large crowds, but I guess people back then just liked to party. Authorities also attempted to find the source of the disease so they could isolate it and prevent it from spreading. They soon found out it was coming from these little guys, rats. Bubonic plague is caused by bacteria called Yersinia pestis, which is most commonly spread by fleas that have fed on rats. The bacteria is especially dangerous because it can spread from person to person through the air if the victim has pneumonic plague, which causes symptoms similar to the flu, including fever, chills, weakness, and a cough. This strain is much more contagious than bubonic plague, which instead causes painful swellings in the lymph nodes, which is how the disease earned its nickname, the Black Death. As the plague continued to spread across London, people became increasingly desperate to escape it. Some fled the city entirely, while others barricaded themselves inside their homes. But for those who couldn't escape, there was only one thing left to do: flee to the countryside. On September 1st, 1665, the Lord Mayor of London ordered all businesses to close and for people to leave the city. At first, this order was ignored, but it soon became clear that staying in London was a death sentence, and so people began to flee. Unfortunately, this proved to be a terrible mistake. Many of the people who fled London brought the plague with them, and it quickly spread to the surrounding countryside. Whole villages were wiped out, and the small towns near London were some of the hardest-hit areas. One of the worst outbreaks occurred in the village of Epmouth, where over 200 people died. London wasn't the only place that experienced a deadly plague. In fact, many parts of England were hit hard during this time period, including Bristol, where over 9,000 people died, and Norwich, where over 4,000 people died. But London was by far the worst affected. The plague lasted for 2 years, from 1665 to 1666, but it really only lasted in London for about 9 months. By the end of 1665, the disease was starting to subside, and by the end of 1666, it was pretty much gone, but not before it killed over 100,000 people. That's about 25% of London's entire population. Now, this wouldn't be the last time that London would experience a bubonic plague outbreak. In fact, there would be 2 more outbreaks after this one, in 1666, 1693, and 1694. But thankfully, none of them would be as deadly as the Great Plague of London. You see, after the 1665 outbreak, London had taken steps to prevent the spread of disease, such as improving sanitation and rats. Control measures that helped to mitigate the severity of future outbreaks. So, you may be wondering, how did London recover from such a devastating outbreak? Well, it turns out that they never really did. The plague had such a profound impact on London that it never really recovered. The city was left in ruins, both physically and economically. And it would take decades for London to rebuild itself, but the plague also had a profound impact on the culture of London. People began to question the role of government and the authority of the church, and this led to a flowering of intellectual and artistic activity. One of the most famous works of literature to come out of this period is Daniel Defoe's A Journal of the Plague Year, which is a fictional account of the Great Plague of London. Another famous work of art that depicts the Great Plague of London is William Hogarth's painting A Rake's Progress, which shows the 5 stages of a young man's descent into madness. The Great Plague of London also had a profound impact on the economy of the city. The plague killed off a large portion of the workforce, and this led to a decline in trade and industry. It would take London over a century to recover economically from the plague. Despite all of this, though, Londoners are a resilient bunch, and they eventually rebuilt their city and made it into what it is today. The Great Plague of London is a reminder of the devastating impact that disease can have on a city. But it's also a testament to the resilience of the human spirit and our ability to rebuild after disaster strikes. Hey there, quick heads up. If you want to learn more about the Black Death, I highly recommend watching the series in the description below.